Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, intense opposition to the boycott against Israel. Now, will it stop the BDS campaign? Well, the BDS campaign has been going on for just over 10 years now. Here's Malika Bilal, our digital producer, with a little bit of a backstory to the BDS campaign. Malika.
Well, thanks, Femi. Well, let's start with a definition. BDS stands for Boycott, Divest, and Sanction. It's a global movement to pressure Israel to stop violating Palestinian rights. Now, specifically, the campaign calls for an end to Israel's illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories, full equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel, and respect for the Palestinian right of return. Now, generally, there are three positions on BDS. Some support boycotting Israel completely, while others oppose the boycott, and they say Israel is unfairly targeted. And then there are people who support limited action. They boycott Israeli enterprises making money in the occupied territories. Now, that third option just got a boost from the United Church of Christ. That's a U.S.-based Protestant group with nearly 1 million members. Its leadership voted to boycott the occupation on June 30th. You can see campaigners celebrating here.
So that's just one victory that BDS claims. Now, the movement touts getting world-famous hip-hop artist Lauryn Hill to cancel a performance in Israel and shutting down the Israeli SodaStream factory built on Palestinian land. They managed that after global protests against actress Scarlett Johansson's association with SodaStream. But there's also been pushback. Last month, US billionaires Sheldon Adelson and Haim Saban pledged tens of millions of dollars to combat the BDS movement on US college campuses. The US government is also including anti-BDS provisions in its trade agreements to discourage its global partners from joining the campaign. So with us to talk about BDS, we have Yusuf Manaya. He's Executive Director of the US campaign to end the Israeli occupation. In Florida, David Abraham is a law professor at the University of Miami and a board member at Partners for Progressive Israel. He supports limited boycott but is critical of BDS. And from Tel Aviv, Will Roth is the CEO of the Israel-Europe Freedom Center, which works against BDS initiatives across Europe. Gentlemen, it is good to have you here. David, I did mention BDS. Its 10th anniversary just passed. If you could say, what has BDS achieved? What would you say? What would be on the list?
Well, I don't think BDS has itself achieved very much, but I think its increased prominence is a reflection of two things. One, the absolute failure of recent Israeli governments to make any sincere effort toward establishing a two-state solution, a free and sovereign Palestinian state alongside the Israeli state. And the failures to move forward in that area have led people out of great frustration to think about other things that would constitute leverage to push that forward. To the extent that it's a response to the failures of diplomacy, it's perfectly understandable why the movement is gaining traction. There is a sensibility, which I would call a BDS sensibility, and then there is an organized movement, and the two are related but not the same.
All right, so David, you said not that much has been achieved, but have a look here on my laptop here. I've got BDS at 10 years old, key successes. I'm going to scroll down here. I'm not going to go through all of them. We mentioned some of them at the top of the programme. Yusuf, for you, these 10 years, what's the impact been from this campaign?
I think there are some very important achievements, and I think we can look at them in two different ways. First, what it's done for Palestinians, and I think that is significant, and then what it's done internationally to help Palestinians. Internally among Palestinians, BDS has actually done something rather remarkable, which is provide a really strong unifying force for Palestinians to get behind. It is a nonviolent movement, and at the same time, it stands strongly for the three different important pillars that represent different segments of the Palestinian community, including refugees and those in exile, those living under occupation, and also Palestinian citizens of Israel. You know, there's a big divide in Palestinian politics right now between Hamas and Fatah, something people are very much familiar with. But as far as BDS goes, 86% of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza support the effort to boycott Israel until it.
How do you know that? That's a very specific figure.
Well, there's polling that's been done on this issue, and that's more than all Palestinian political parties get combined in terms of support. So in terms of unifying Palestinians, this is a platform all Palestinians can get behind. And internationally, we've seen a number of successes. Many of them are listed on that site and also on our site as well, endoccupation.org.
So I want to give a story of one of those successes, according to BDS supporters. This is Gospel of Claymore, who tweeted to the stream saying, "Since becoming aware of BDS, I personally have begun buying Palestinian goods via charities and buying as gifts too." And this person went on to say that they also boycott Israeli goods. But Will, I want to go to you with this next tweet. This is from Hashem, and he summed up something that I've seen in other tweets from other people. He says BDS is the quote-unquote non-violent strategy that the world has been asking Palestinians to endorse. So it's ironic that it's now being attacked. What's your take on what Hashem says?
Well, I think that the BDS is being attacked because it became violent. We're talking about the BDS as if the BDS is a movement. It's not. The BDS is an idea. It's an idea that many anti-Israeli organizations have decided to take and prompt as their own. And what they've done, at least in Europe, is that they will talk about anti-Israeli issues, and they might be actually really interesting, important issues that we must put on the table and talk about.
Could I just jump in and ask you a question, if that's okay?
Please.
I just want to ask you a question because you made an allegation about BDS being a violent movement. Could you point to any specific violent acts that any BDS tactics have resulted in?
I promise you, I'm getting to it.
Okay. Be interested to hear about it. It'll be a newsflash for me.
Because we've seen BDS-oriented organizations. So, for example, in Germany, in Frankfurt, where BDS personnel shouted, "Gas the Jews." Now, that's not a pretty good idea, right? At least mainly in Germany. A second thing is that we had, after several BDS rallies in Denmark, a shooting at a synagogue with a Jewish security guy shot dead. So we need to understand.
What does that have to do with the act of boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning? These are inherently non-violent actions.
Speech, but you have to take responsibility when that freedom of speech becomes violent. And I'm sorry, you just need to live on the ground. You try, and I'm asking you, why won't you come visit me in London, visit me in Paris, visit me in Germany, and you go with the yarmulke? Just go with the yarmulke. Don't say anything. Just go with it. And you tell me what happens when the BDS is marching and saying that Israel is so bad.
Yeah. Okay. So
in front of Jewish shop owners.
Take a pause for a moment. David, what did you want to bring in?
I think, if I may, we've got lots of different things suddenly piled onto each other. So first, BDS as a strategy of Palestinian people under occupation is a totally positive political choice to raise the costs of those who are occupying them. And I would point out that the official position is boycott of the settlements and goods produced in the occupied territory. So even the Palestinian, let me finish, please. The Palestinian organization.
Will, give us a moment, because David, hold tight for a moment, because I've got stereo happening and I can only hear in mono. All right, so Will, David allowed you to finish. Allow David to finish, because I can't hear a single word you're saying anyway. David, finish up.
So there are two things about the BDS sensibility. One is this frustration at the inability to make progress, and that frustration has drawn people of extraordinarily goodwill in church organizations, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, to try to create the kind of leverage and pressure to move forward on the establishing.
And David, just out of interest, do you see anything wrong with that? A non-violent movement is like, how do we help diplomacy along a little bit? This might help.
I entirely endorse that.
Yeah.
At the same time, it is true that BDS in Europe, perhaps more than elsewhere, has also been a magnet for those who do not want there to be a state of Israel on the map at all. And we have that
just
part
all
for
Jew
Israel.
hatred. Sorry,
Reject.
it's just
All
all
right,
Jew
gentlemen,
hatred.
I'm going to move things on a little bit, because also what Will was describing is a climate, an atmosphere, and we're specifically talking about a non-violent movement. That's how I understand it, but I'm interested in all your perspectives as well. As to, am I interested in the community? Malika.
Right, their perspective. Well, this is one tweet kind of picking up on what you said, Will, but pushing back. This is CWP, who says BDS is a tool in the struggle. It's aimed at changing Israeli policies. It's not aimed at the Jewish people in general or Jewish Israelis. But Yusuf, I want to pivot here and go to you with this one, because there is some criticism of the BDS movement. This is Michael, who says, I support BDS, but sometimes it backfires against Israelis who are defending the rights of Palestinians. For instance, when work is conducted with pro-Palestinian Israeli activists or academics, there's sometimes controversy as a result of that. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say that people of conscience in Israel who have been working to support Palestinian rights for many years predating the BDS movement have paid a price for that. And that's unfortunate, but that's because the Israeli state wants to repress any efforts at trying to change its policies. So this is not about...
Let me ask you, the Israeli state, what is happening with when the Palestinian Authority is actually running out people, journalists, threatening peace protests?
You do realize that the Palestinian Authority exists as a function of the Israeli state.
But the Palestinians have their own autonomy. They control Area A and B. They have freedom of movement in those areas. They have their own police force. I mean, they have their own courts.
This is
just
embarrassing for you, sir. This is just embarrassing for you, sir.
Can we
unheard
go
of.
back
I
to
mean,
the
you can
boycott?
I would invite you to live under occupation for a little while and see what that actually means.
I live under BDS. Will, give me a moment. Will Roth.
I can go as a Jew.
Will Roth, CEO of Israel Europe Freedom Center. Give me a moment. David, what did you want to add?
I think we want to discuss the boycott and divestment and sanctions issues and the movement. So let me make 2 points here. One is on the three central principles of the BDS movement. Equality for Palestinian Arab citizens of Israel is, I think, an indisputable thing for which we all stand, and the deprivation, particularly of collective rights of Palestinian Arab Israelis, is a blot on what is supposed to be a democratic country of Israel. That one is quite easy. The end of the occupation of territories conquered in 1967 is a prerequisite for any stable peace going forward.
See David, but to your point, to reminding us why we're all here, how is this BDS campaign actually helping getting there?
Well, okay, one more second.
Yeah.
The third prong of the BDS movement is a recognition of the Nakba, of the catastrophe in which Palestinians were rendered refugees, and the right of return for those refugees. Now, in principle, those people became refugees through no fault of their own, and it's certainly our position and one understanding of BDS that compensation is due to those people, as is some agreed upon symbolic return of those refugees to inside Israel proper. But if the right of return is understood as all displaced Palestinians 1948 and their descendants returning to inside the borders of the current state of Israel, then that's the end of Israel as a separate state.
David, I'm going to move things on a little bit, because talking about, because I really have to focus on this particular campaign. That's why we're here. There's so many conversations we've had about Israel and Palestine. I'm going to focus back on why we're all here. Head back here onto my laptop. I know that you two are as well, but we only have a set amount of time. On my laptop, I'm going to show you some of the boycott campaigns that are going on here. This one is Why Boycott, and it's Boycott Israel, i.e. the idea of deliberately going out to make sure you're buying Israeli goods. And then there's also a website and part of a campaign here called the Canary Mission, which are actually looking at people who are very prominent in the BDS movement and naming and calling them out as radicals as well. There's this whole movement to actually counteract your movement, Yusuf. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's just an indication of the extent to which BDS has grown and become, an important player in this issue. Not only is there organized opposition to it in the form of some of these organizations and movements, but Congress in the United States is attempting to take legislative action to address the BDS movement. Presidential hopefuls for 2016 are making statements about the BDS movement.
When did this pushback start?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do, frankly, especially most recently, with, of course, the war on Gaza in recent years, successive wars on Gaza in recent years, but also actually the outcome of successive Israeli elections now. Electing right-wing governments, particularly the last election in which a right-wing government came into power under the leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu, after he specifically declared that there will be no such thing as a Palestinian state.
So politics in Israel, you feel, is the thing that's actually sparking up these anti-BDS campaigns?
Well, I think the prominence of the BDS movement is a result primarily of the fact that most people realize.
I'm sorry, that's just that. You're not working to help Palestinians. That's the last thing that you're doing. When we look at what you talked earlier about the SodaStream factory, the SodaStream factory costed thousands of Palestinian workers their job. They're now sitting home unemployed. So you're not doing anything to help Palestinians.
While I'm sure Palestinians appreciate your concern for their jobs, they would also like their basic rights to self-determination, freedom of movement, and access to all the other rights that you enjoy and everybody else enjoys in free society. So as
I've got you all speaking, I'm just going to ask you all just to give me a pause for a moment. Malika, what do you want to add?
Well, I'm going to broaden out this spectrum here, the spectrum that Yusuf was talking about, the anti-BDS movement. There are those who have qualms with it, maybe not all the way, but this is one aspect. This is Katie on Twitter. She says, the whole of Israel cannot be victimized for the illegal actions of a few, and BDS, therefore, should directly target just the illegal occupation. So, David, you see that nuance there. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, Partners for Progressive Israel supports boycott of products and investments located in the occupied West Bank. Now, Israelis, progressive Israelis, many have taken that position for quite some time, and there it makes a difference. Here in North America, here in Europe, there isn't that much to be seen coming from the West Bank. So that's not a major issue. I think the backside of what Munir has pointed out is that Bibi Netanyahu loves BDS.
Oh, come on,
it feeds the paranoia on which the right wing in Israel thrives. So there is an odd synergy going on between the ability to characterize the BDS movement as wanting Israel to disappear and
that's what they're saying.
The activities.
Sometimes it's just that stupid, you know. It's just that simple. There's a very nice sentence that said, keep it simple, stupid. And that's what they're saying. They're actually saying that we are going to protest in front of a Jewish small business owner, let's say in Denmark, and he won't be intimidated just because he's selling, let's say, some Israeli product. And we're going to stand behind that and say, yeah, we're just protesting Israel. You're intimidating people here. And that hate, and let me ask you, and I'm going to tell you very simply, because it's something that I think that all of us can work together.
Please make it simple.
The whole idea of hate speech that we're having from the BDS, if we can put it down, let Palestinians and Israelis work together as they are trying. Come to Israel, talk to Palestinians, talk to settlers, talk to other Israelis. You'll hear that I just want to live my life. I just want to know that I go to work, earn a decent pay, get out of the job, go out with my friends.
You can't deny people their desire to be free in their own country, not the Israelis and not the Palestinians.
This is important. Will, give me a pause. Give me a pause. David, I want you to say that again. Will, give me a pause. David, say it again, because Will was talking.
I think the question is whether BDS is a positive contribution to what we know to be the basic question, namely, can we advance the right of Palestinians to an independent country of their own in which they can shape their own future as free and independent nation?
So here's what I'm curious about.
Israel.
Here's what I'm curious about, Guess. Will, you have issues with BDS. How does the Palestinian territories have freedom? How do they have their own sovereignty? How is there more equality between Palestinians and Israeli citizens? And how about Palestinians who used to live in that region who can't and would like to go home? If it's not BDS, what would you suggest? How do you get back to that situation? How do you resolve those issues?
Right. You know, you can't just pressure people like you would pressure any material to try to make diamonds.
So we hear that. We hear that very clearly from you. I didn't hear another alternative. What do you want to suggest?
Well, actually, if we will go to the Bibi Netanyahu option, there's the economic piece. Try to make sure that Palestinians and Israelis are working together within their communities.
Right. So this is always the answer at the end of the day from people who oppose BDS. It's perpetual apartheid. Look, we've seen this time and again. That's what it is. Ruling over millions of Palestinians without giving them a vote is apartheid, and that's what your answer is, and it's very clear to everyone. I do want to make one point though, if I could. This working together idea is Yusuf doesn't like that. Hold tight for a moment, Yusuf. Yeah, I just want to make a point about the previous issue because I think it's very important, and this is the distinction that I would draw between David's position and mine. And while I appreciate your position, sir, about boycotting the settlements, I think if you believe that the settlements are a real problem, one must be intellectually honest and realize that these settlements do not sprout on the hilltops of the West Bank by themselves when it rains. These settlements are part and parcel of a calculated state policy intended to control the land and the resources in the West Bank. Boycotting the settlements.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more.
If we agree on that, then it logically follows.
Yusuf, David totally agrees with you. I want to squeeze in one more person from the community.
If I could just finish this one point,
very quickly.
If we agree on that, sir, then the target is not the settlements, but the state which is crafting this settlement policy. The settlements alone are not significant enough to change the behavior of the state. And you and I, as intellectually honest people, know that whether or not you're prepared to admit it or not.
Well, no. I'm prepared to admit everything that is persuasive or correct. BDS, the question is whether BDS is going to undermine or undergird Netanyahu
and the answer to that from your perspective is what, David?
Stronger.
Will, just give me a moment. Will, give me a moment. I want to just hear the end of David's sentence. Will Roth, let me hear the end of David's sentence. I do not want to end the show with Will Roth, let me hear the end of David's sentence. That would be an appalling way, an appalling use of time. All right, David, finish your sentence. Will, hold tight.
So one can support in the long term a one-state solution. Partners for Progressive Israel and I do not. I think there have to be two sovereign independent states, one Israel, one Palestine. How we get to that the best way, I think the current effort to internationalize the issue, to bring forward UN Security Council pressures on the United States to stop backstopping Netanyahu all the time, to compel within 2 years a conclusion to the negotiations that we have been seeing in sham form for years now, that is the only viable way to go. BDS policies entrench the paranoia that feeds the Israeli right. And that's why I think as a strategic matter, it is not the most useful thing to do, even though I completely understand the sentiment of desperation.
You're listening to David Abraham. We also have Yusuf Manaya and Will Roth in this conversation. Gentlemen, the conversation is not over yet, I promise you. There'll be more to be had at stream.aljazeera.com. I just want to check in, though, with Malika, and how is our online community reacting?
This is a common sentiment. This is Kenneth on Facebook, and he says, I would much rather have BDS than war and violence.
Very interesting. Gentlemen, we're not done yet. Stream.aljazeera.com. I will see you there. Just a quick tease for tomorrow's show. There was a hashtag called The Africa the Media Never Shows You. We are flipping the script. And guess what? We will show you the Africa the media never shows you. See you on the next AJ Stream very soon. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We are talking about the BDS movement. Malika has been typing away like this the whole show, trying to find the little ins in. How's it been going online?
Interesting.
Right.
This is one of the views that I want to share. This is Matan, and there are a few people who are just like Matan online who've tweeted us. He says the BDS movement is meant to destroy the only Jewish state in the world. Nothing concerned with helping the Palestinians at all. David, why do you think a boycott, sanctions, divestment, things that have to do with economic hurt, why do you think people take that to mean these people want to destroy our state? Where do you think that comes from?
Well, some of it comes from fear and anxiety, and it has to be, I think, explained to people that the rights of Palestinian people to a sovereign state of their own do not mean the elimination of the Israeli state, which is the historical homeland of the Jewish people and ought at the same time to be the state of all of its citizens. Now, when the third pillar in particular of the BDS movement refers to the right of return of refugees from 1948 and thereafter, I think we have seen that that is an issue that has to be addressed. But if it is projected in this ambiguous way that everyone in their descendants who is unjustly displaced has the right to return, that means the end of the only Jewish state or homeland of Jewish people state in the world.
Well,
it's good in academia, not in real life. You know, all of us, even here in Israel, and I know that right now between your two opinions, it sounds really hard to understand, but even here in Israel, not only from the so-called peace side, all Israelis actually want to live in peace. We believe that the Palestinians should live proper, free life. And I think that even you denigrated Bibi Netanyahu, and he himself said that he believes in the two-state solution. Now, the BDS only achievement so far, and I can tell you from first-hand experience, and I would welcome you to come out of academia and experience real life, and just take a look. When people are calling, and I'm sorry for saying it again, but when there are riots in France, and Jews are targeted because they're Jews, when I have to go with security guards to the University of Marseille just because I'm going to say something pro-Israeli.
Well, we covered some of the anti-Semitism that's happening in France and also anti-immigrant feeling that's happening in France. We did not even mention once in those conversations BDS. Why do you connect the two?
Because the BDS is the fuel, unfortunately. And I have to say that
just to get this clear, anti-Semitism did not exist in Europe before BDS. I mean, are you even okay?
You're using my words in a way that they weren't intended to.
No, I'm just trying to understand your argument. You're saying that a movement that non-violently is trying to address Palestinian rights is the cause of anti-Semitism. That's nonsensical.
That's non-violent. That's the main issue. And unfortunately, I know that the US is some years behind Europe on those topics, but you come to Europe, and I say it again, you come to Europe, you try to talk to BDS activists, you stand in front of a Jewish businessman.
So Will, let me
I've been in Europe a fair bit recently.
By people with BDS signs.
I do think that we have
seen
the importation.
Will's better at speaking than listening. Will, just allow David to just jump in here. David, go ahead.
So I do think we have unfortunately seen the importation of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict into Europe and tensions between Muslim and Jewish communities. I think that's a very unfortunate fact that is added to some elements of historical anti-Semitism pre-existing in Europe. And I do think that the BDS movement has attracted some people who hate Jews. I mean, I think that's undeniable.
Wow.
I don't think it's critical or central to what's going on here.
But it is. But that's the bike product.
Right, so Will, we hear that. We hear an alternative. We hear some different perspectives. Let me see what the community is saying.
Two varying perspectives. This is Rafiq on Twitter who says it's a great movement, BDS, and more than just economic damage is being done. People are actually waking up. But I want to throw a little wrinkle in here, Yusuf. This is a video comment we received from a Palestinian in Israel, and these are his thoughts. This is Ayman.
Well, I think that what the BDS movement fails to communicate is that there is a variety of voices within Israel, some of them very critical. And as a Palestinian author living in Israel and writing in Hebrew about these topics, often being critical of the country, it's important to me that my voice is heard by the international community. And by silencing Israel and imposing a cultural boycott of the country, you're also silencing my voice.
So this was a call from Palestinian civil society, but do you think that not all voices in the occupied territories and other places were included?
Well, I appreciate Ayman's perspective, and I will just note that I too happen to be a Palestinian citizen of Israel and very familiar with the discourse and the conversation among Palestinian citizens of Israel who are critical of the state, and also Israelis who are critical of the state, of which there is a small but growing number as well. But you know, one of the important things about the BDS movement, as I stated from the outset, is that it does not compromise on the rights or interests of any particular Palestinian group or subgroup within the Palestinian population. It calls for full equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel. It calls for a right of return in accordance with international law, UN Resolution 194, and it calls for an end to the occupation and self-determination for Palestinians. These are basic human rights. The question that I would have for people like Will and others who claim that the BDS movement poses an existential threat to the state of Israel is, what sort of state faces an existential threat just based on the proposition of recognizing the rights of the people who live in the land? There's only one type of state like that, an apartheid state.
But that's not true. You know, we are not, the worry that you see in Israel and in other communities in Europe or even in the US with regard to the BDS is that they are violent. The BDS core issue, instead of dealing with boycott, sanctions, or divestment, what they're actually doing is threatening Jews living abroad.
So Will, we're repeating ourselves here. You made this point so beautifully during the show, because I have to wrap up here, and I know exactly what you're saying. You're saying that there are anti-Semites who are in the BDS movement, and they're also violent.
Anti-Semites. What I'm trying to say.
I'm going to wrap this up. Finish your sentence. A sentence. Go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that if the BDS really want to make sure that Palestine becomes free, that the Palestinians feel free or in any way that they want to determine for themselves, let Palestinians and Israelis do it by ourselves. We've tried by governments with treaties that didn't work. We're trying with boycotts that are not helping anyone because they're hurting Palestinians more than they're hurting Jews.
Let me show you something, gentlemen.
From Palestinian civil society. It's a call from Palestinians for international solidarity with outstanding support across the Palestinian political spectrum. If you care so much about Palestinians, start listening to them.
Palestinians saying that it's not true.
Gentlemen,
you just heard
and Yusuf and David, I'm calling time on this. I want to show you three things though via my laptop before I call time. This is part of the pushback, the boycotting the boycott. And so this is from a webpage that we found, the Israeli Cartoon Project. Have a look here on this tweet. Israel is sending aid to Nepal, and it's got a BDS sign here. Are you going to boycott that too? The inference being that Israel is doing a lot of very good things to its surrounding neighbors. Are you going to be upset about that as well? This is a whole BDS fail campaign where if you go here every day, you can find an example, probably more in line with what Will's saying, is about how BDS campaign is not succeeding. And this is a really interesting Canary mission targeting activists who are working to spread the BDS movement, actually saying, these people, you shouldn't actually give these people jobs. This is a really interesting sense of momentum going on here. Just very briefly, David, do you think this might actually hamper the BDS campaign, the fact that people are fighting back?
Well, boycotts are an expression of free speech. People have the right to boycott. They have the right to boycott the boycotters. One has to measure the political valences and the political power. I mean, U.S. Legislators in places like Illinois and elsewhere are jumping all over themselves to demonstrate how pro-Israel they can be by threatening to boycott the boycotters. I mean, it's not necessarily a winning proposition. I think it has to be assessed for its political utility as well. You know, but we do live in a world of free speech, and boycotts are a form of free speech, and you can't stop other people from boycotting you if you're boycotting somebody else.
Will, the boycott of the boycott, the end of BDS?
Well,
No.
I don't
This is for Will. David, I've got you. I've got your take. Love it. Love your take. Got it. Thank you, Will.
Okay, sure.
Well, I don't think so. I think that the BDS is the end of the BDS, at least here in Europe. Once you have people that are demonstrating that they're not actually working in a place that is non-violent, very peaceful, then you lose people here in Europe.
All right.
And more we hear, at least I hear from friends that are Palestinians that moved abroad, at least in my home city, in Innsbruck. You actually hear that it's just,
So the
you
BDS
can't
is
relate
the
to
end of the BDS. Yusuf, are you worried?
No, at the end of the day, this is a battle of ideas. On one side, you have an idea about people's self-determination, and on the other side, you have the idea of denying that determination. In the 21st century, there is a clear winner. Perpetual occupation and apartheid will not win.
Malika?
There's just no apartheid. Sorry, I just can't let that word stand on air.
Will Roth, David Abraham, Yusuf
honest.
Manaya. We're going to take this online. Meanwhile, online, Malika, you will have the last word. Will?
Thank you. I actually give the last word to someone named Hammam on Twitter. BDS succeeds where international diplomacy fails, and I know he's not the only one who thinks that.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. This conversation could go on for hours, days, months, years, decades, and it has. But for now, I'm wrapping it up. Thank you very much, Yusuf Manaya, David Abraham, Will Roth, for a very spirited conversation. Appreciate all of your insights, your takes. And that is it. Calling time on today's A-Day stream. Thanks for watching.